This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product. And GatheringMagic.com, the #1 source for Magic the Gathering news and content.
Hey, this is Andre, and I'm going to be opening the built-from-scratch Red Commander deck. As a fan of the Izzet, red is certainly one of the colors that I enjoy playing, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we get in this box. So we'll go ahead and start opening this. Apologies to box purists. I may destroy this in the process. Put that to the side. As you can see, the boxes are the same kind of boxes that they gave us last year, which are really nice as packaging. Unfortunately, they don't hold sleeved cards. That's a shame. Let's see, what do we got in here? This is Daretti, new Goblin Planeswalker. A lot of people have been hoping for a Goblin Planeswalker for some time, and we finally got one. Best of all, he has a really interesting ability. He interacts with artifacts. His +2 is the kind of ability that red always likes to get. It's not strictly card advantage, but it's certainly a card manipulation. His -2 allows for some really broken tricks, discarding high-costed artifacts with his +2 ability, and then minusing an Ornithopter to get a Blightsteel Colossus or some other card that is sure to get you hated out of the game. And his -10 is an emblem that interacts very well with the kind of things that artifacts like to do. There's a lot of effects that allow for sacrificing to get bonuses. And unfortunately, he's red, which means you can't run him in Sharoom. But that said, brown decks are pretty popular, and brown-red decks, I'm sure, are going to go on the uptick now. All right, so let's take a look at the rest of the deck. You wait there. All right, we start off with the Daretti emblem, which, by the way, while I'm unwrapping this, I have to say kudos to Wizards for finally putting tokens and emblems and other cards like that in these decks. Daretti emblem, Myr tokens, always fun. Oh, we got plenty of them. I thought we were just going to get one. Oh, right, that's the other thing too. These are double-sided tokens. So on the one side you get Myrs, on the other side you get Pendavites, which I think, honestly, they should do that with regular tokens, in my opinion. Let's see, we got goblins. On the other side, we have goats. That's kind of funny, actually. It's like a little goblin riding on a goat into battle. Worm tokens. Wonder what these go for. Let's see. Also goats. Very impressive. Goats are everywhere. Another Myr token. Got separated from the pack. Let's see what else we got. We have mountains. To be honest, not very crazy about the choice of some of these mountains, but who cares? Yes, mountains. Arcane Lighthouse. Take that, Geist of St. Traft. Being able to take and prevent hexproof from being gained on your opponent's side is a pretty handy ability. The actual Daretti that we'll be playing with. Felden of the Third Path. This guy gets a lot of attention simply because he's a callback character to Magic's past, very, very old past. I actually have the Colors of Magic sitting on my desk, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but I know his story is in there. His ability to basically Kiki-Jiki a dead creature in your graveyard, making it an artifact, in addition to its other types, is something that I'm sure a lot of players are going to have fun playing with. A 2/3 for 3, as far as his body goes, is pretty great. They could have made him a 1/1 easily, and I think he still would have been a fine card. The fact that he's 3 mana means that you'll get to play him a number of times, which is good because I'm sure people are going to try to want to get him off the board as quickly as possible. Also, some of the saddest flavor text, I think. She will come back to me. No, she won't, Felden. No, she won't. Bosch Iron Golem. Quick aside, I actually modded this into a Hulkbuster suit a few years ago. I think I might try that again with this guy. Anyway, again, his ability interacts well with Daretti and with, I'm sure, the rest of the deck. Yeah, this guy's old. We know what he does. Goblin Welder. 1/1 for 1. Nobody's going to play with that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Like Polluted Delta, this guy's going to see a lot of play. Being able to, again, do the kind of tricks that Duretti allows you to do multiple times with this deck is going to be beneficial. And honestly, I'm more of a commander player. I don't really play Legacy, but even I know that this is going to make an impact. Tuktuk the Explorer. 3-mana 1/1 haste. This guy just begs to be blocked, and honestly, nobody ever blocks him. You have to strap swords or something on this guy, which is ironic because at that point he can't be blocked, more likely than not. All the same, an interesting addition. I don't think anybody's ever run him as a commander that I've seen, but he's a fun card. Dualcaster Mage. Snapcaster's spiritual brother, or more like cousin, really. This card is definitely going to see play in, I think, any format that can run him, because being able to play a Reverberate for 1 more mana that leaves a 2/2 body behind is pretty fantastic. I think this guy's going to see a lot of work in Riku decks, where you can get 4 spells, right, with Riku out, and I'm looking forward to playing him in my Nicobolas deck. Hoard-Smelter Dragon. It's interesting. His ability can be aggressive and defensive. With this deck, since we are going to be running a fair number of artifacts, you'll be able to trigger his ability a little bit more often. If you have a 4-mana, 5-mana artifact that isn't doing anything for you at the moment, being able to pump him and swing in for 9 or 10 is going to be handy, and besides dragons. Everybody loves dragons. Speaking of which, Wurmcoil Hellkite. This guy, I believe, is new. All creatures attack each combat if able, and being able to plus every creature for 1 in a red, even if he's not attacking, means that you get value off of him the turn that you play him. Man, look at those little guys. In for a bad day. Tyrant's Familiar. This guy has an interesting lieutenant ability. Being able to hit a potential blocker before they can block is interesting. The fact that he has 7 power when his lieutenant ability is active is nice, because that's a fair chunk of life even in Commander. He does cost 7, but that's usually not too much of a problem in Commander. That said, he kind of looks like Niv Mizzet. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Moving on. Bogardan Hellkite. This guy's classic. He gets the new frame update. Flash, 8 mana to deal 5 and leave a 5/5 flyer behind. We all know him. Bitter Feud. This card is one of the ones that I've been looking for. It screams politics. The fact that one of the players, or neither of the players that you choose, has to be you, means that you can really play around with the board. Yeah, moving on. Impact Resonance. This card is going to be a little bit tricky, I think, the first couple of times people play it. There's going to be some interesting math. If you can't read it, it says, Impact Resonance deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is the greatest amount of damage dealt by a source to a permanent or player this turn. What's interesting is you could have nothing to do with the damage that this card references. It's 2 mana, man. This is going to be interesting. You could watch 2 people duke it out and then just, add insult to injury by just blowing up even more of their stuff while you sit safely behind your defenses. Chaos Warp. This guy's been going up a little bit in price lately. He's a fantastic card. It gives mono red an answer to enchantments. It gives a lot of decks an ability to deal with indestructible things. And usually red is more of a damage for destruction kind of card, or kind of color, excuse me. And this sort of gets around that. It definitely adds that sort of, I don't know what's going to happen, recklessness of red, because you could end up with something worse on the table. But that's what makes this card fun. Volcanic Offering. All right, so the offering cycle is kind of interesting. It feels a bit like the cards that they introduced in Conspiracy, and I'm glad that they're doing it for Commander this year. If you can't read it, it says, destroy target non-basic land you don't control and target non-basic land of an opponent's choice that you don't control. So regardless, this isn't hurting you. Volcanic Offering deals 7 damage to target creature you don't control, and 7 damage to target creature of an opponent's choice you don't control. So it's an instant, it's 5 mana, it's not that hard to pull off during combat. The 7 damage is relevant because it hits a lot of creatures, and it forces your opponent to sort of be a jerk to somebody else. So again, a lot of politics that can be had with this card. Word of Seizing is one of those cards that doesn't see as much play, although I don't understand why. The split second cards, I think, have always been very interesting. And I think this is one of those cards that can surprise people when they're attacking you with a giant Ruhan or Rafik or whatever else. Anyway, I like it. Magma Quake, it's kind of funny, sort of weird. It's included in this set. It does kill your planeswalkers along with everybody else's. I guess they wanted to give every color a way to deal with them, and this is definitely a good choice if you're running a heavy planeswalker meta. That said, I've never found it all that interesting despite the sweet Nicobolas text. Starstorm. Now here's a card that I love. The fact that it can be a board wipe whenever you need it to, or cycle in case there's really nothing on the table that needs to be answered, is fantastic. I love cycling. I think it's a great mechanic, and anytime it appears on a card this versatile, I'm happy. Scrap Mastery. All right, this is a new one. This is the red Living Death version for artifacts. Each player exiles all artifact cards from his or her graveyard, then sacrifices all artifacts he or she controls, and puts all cards he or she exiled this way onto the battlefield. What's interesting about this is I get the feeling that not that many people are going to be getting as much value out of this as they do out of a Living Death, simply because if you're running a very artifact-heavy deck, you're just by numbers stand to benefit a lot more than somebody who maybe has a Signet, maybe a Sword or a Solemn Simulacrum in their graveyard. So very interesting, definitely very interesting, and I think any deck that runs either Duretti or Bosch, this is pretty much an auto-include in that deck. Insight Rebellion, another new card. It says for each player, Insight Rebellion deals damage to that player and each creature that player controls equal to the number of creatures he or she controls. This is a 6-mana sorcery, so you're not going to be surprising anybody with it. That said, it's definitely one of the more fair, chaotic spells that I've seen in a while. Everybody sort of gets punished for as far as their ambitions go. So if somebody's running a crazy Riss token deck, they're definitely going to suffer to this. If somebody's running a blue-black, blue-white control deck with not that many creatures, they're really not going to care too much about the spell, which is good because then they won't counter it. Blasphemous Act. Yeah, 13 to everything. Cheaper to cast, the more creatures there are. It's a pretty sweet red sweeper, and I'm glad it's in here. Hypocrisite. This guy's pretty interesting. I like the fact that he dies and he comes back, he dies and he comes back. It definitely triggers enter the battlefield effects, leave the battlefield effects. Yeah, neat card. Junk Diver. I love that they kept the old art and it has the updated frame. I like the art. It sort of evokes a little bit of the old Clash of the Titans feel, the old one, not the remake. And the ability is fantastic. Obviously, combos with certain cards. But yeah, I'm very glad it's in this deck. Solemn Simulacrum. I mean, what hasn't already been said about our favorite sad robot? He's so sad because he knows he just showed up so that he can die. Poor guy. Steel Hellkite. Great in an artifact deck. Great in any deck, really. And it's an interesting control card. You can pump him so you can be aggro, or you can use him to wipe the board of permanents of a certain mana cost. Great inclusion, especially great for new players that maybe haven't had a chance to pick those up. Wurmcoil Engine. Speaking of cards that are great for new players, this guy has been going up in price. He's I believe he was at 25 prior to the printing in this set. It's amazing value. Death Touch Lifelink is ridiculous. Any deck can run him. He leaves 2 creatures behind. He's a great target for Mimic Vat. And obviously, Duretti and a number of the other cards in here combo very well with it. So thank you, Wizards. Thanks. We need more of these guys. Myr Battlesphere. They just look like they're having fun, don't they? I don't know if they're running away or they're waiting to be caught or if they're pulling that ball. I don't know. It looks fantastic. The Myr have a fantastic design. I think they're really fun and interesting. And this guy, when it comes into play, puts 4 Myr tokens, which obviously this deck, is chock full of. And then you can tap Myr to do shenanigans with its power. It's really interesting. It's fun. It's a great card to return. The fact that it's a 4/7 means that it's going to be surviving a fair number of attack steps. Pentavis. Yeah, this guy. He makes little versions of himself. He can pump himself with the little Pentavites. It's definitely interesting. It's fun. Good inclusion in here. Ruby Medallion. I love that art. I love that the medallions are in these decks. I'm a big fan of the modern border. I know. Heresy. But I'm a big fan of it, and they just look really sharp. Jalum Tome. 2, tap, draw a card, then discard a card. It's interesting. It's pretty standard for red artifact card draw. It's not really card advantage again. It's more of like, well, I drew another land, I guess I'll pitch it. It does combo with, or I guess synergize with some of the cards in this deck, so that's nice. Trading Post. This card's a lot of fun by itself. In an artifact deck, it's even more fun. It lets you do very small things that are incrementally good. And I think players who like to play a long, patient game can get a lot of benefit out of this. There's almost always something worse than this at the table to blow up. That Acidic Slime comes down. It's probably going to look at a Soul Ring before it looks at this. And so it's just a nice kind of safe, fun card to play. Cage Sun is fantastic for monocolor decks. I mean, you pump your creatures and you double the amount of mana that you're getting. Well, I shouldn't say double. You add an additional. It's no mana reflection. But it's a great inclusion for these decks. Spine of Ish Sah. When you really absolutely have to kill something and you don't mind spending 7 mana for it. That's fine. This deck doesn't have a problem sacrificing and bringing it back. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I've seen decks get a little abusive with it. Flametongue Village. Straight out of Lorwyn. I feel like the art for the Flametongue from Lorwyn looks a little bit like they're made out of Fruity Pebbles. Just my observation. Anyway, it's interesting. It allows your creatures to come into play with haste, which can be really good when you have a big creature coming out. Yeah. Buried Ruin, pretty much an auto-include in this deck. If they hadn't put it in, most people would be running it at some point. It's nice to be able to return artifacts from your graveyard to your hand. Darksteel Citadel, it's an artifact, it's a land, it's indestructible. Dormant Volcano, the original Kuru lands. I always wondered if they were going to reprint these or not. More John Avon art. If you love him, they're awesome. If you hate him, they're terrible. They're pretty much worse than the bounce lands from Ravnica. I don't think anybody would have a hard time arguing with that. But hey, in a monocolor deck, I guess it's kind of interesting. Forgotten Cave, cycle to draw a card. It's great at the start of a game. You just put it into play tap, you don't really care. Late game, it means that you can just cycle a card out and draw something hopefully better than that. Ghost Quarter, pretty solid removal for pesky utility lands. Any deck can run them. Great Furnace, artifact, land, taps for red. Straightforward. Phyrexia's Core. Sacrifice an artifact, like Spine of Ish Sah, and then get it back somehow, with all the shenanigans this deck does. It's an interesting card. I don't see it being run outside of a artifact-heavy deck, obviously. Reliquary Tower is kind of funny, because in this deck, I don't know, maybe I haven't seen all the cards. I don't think any red players ever said, oh man, I have too many cards in my hand every turn. I really wish I had a Reliquary Tower in play. That said, I could be wrong. If the opposite is true for you, then congratulations, you're a way better red mage than I am. Smoldering Crater, colorless cycle. It costs 1 more than the other one, which only costs 1 red. But again, it's versatility, which is great. Temple of the False God, Soul Ring on a land, as long as it's turn 5 or later. Nice card to have. Classic Flametongue Kavu with the new art from, I believe it was one of the Plane Chase sets. Comes into play, deals 4 damage to a creature, and then attacks or blocks, deals another 4 damage. Great versatile card. I really enjoy him. Beetleback Chief, he's back. Still no foil of this guy for whoever cares out there. But he's interesting. He makes 2 1/1s when he comes into play. He's no Siege Gang commander, I'll tell you that. Ingot Chewer. Ingot? I never know how to say that word correctly. Anyway, more artifact destruction. In this deck, you might even consider evoking him to blow up your Spine of Ish Sah or Wurmcoil Engine or something else that has value in your graveyard. Interesting inclusion. I like it. Spite Bellows. Kind of wants to be a Flametongue Kavu. Costs 2 mana too many, but he does evoke. There's definitely elemental decks out there that benefit from him. Faithless Looting. More ways to put stuff in your graveyard. Very interesting. Kind of a classic red deck, red hand cycler now. Flashback is also handy. Whip Flare. Yay, your Myr tokens will survive. Myr Retriever. When it dies, it returns another artifact from your graveyard to your hand. Pretty handy, especially under Mimic Vat. Actually, Mimic Vat says exile, doesn't it? I don't know now. Oh man, I've made a terrible Magic faux pas. Regardless, this card's pretty cool. Myr Sire. He's the Myr dad. When he dies, he puts a 1/1 colorless Myr artifact token into the battlefield. Great sacrifice for the trading post. Bottle Gnomes, reinforcements or refreshments. They auto sack themselves, which is pretty handy. Cathodion. When he dies, he adds 3 to your mana pool. He says, hey, I borrowed this mana. Oh, I have to go now. Please have it back. Oh, nifty art. Interesting. Palladium Myr. Looks like a Myr ate a Soul Ring, and now he taps for 2. Kind of interesting. Pilgrim's Eye. Gets those lands out of your deck every time it comes into play. If you have a way to sack him, bring him back. It helps thin your deck out. Everflowing Chalice. Multi-kicker. It adds a mana for every time you kicked it. This card was fun when it was in Standard, and it should probably be fun in a deck like this too. Panic Spellbomb. That sounds like a name of a Magic-oriented rock band. When you sacrifice it, or excuse me, when it goes into... when you sacrifice it, a creature can't block, and if you pay a red, you get to draw a card. Kind of underwhelming, to be honest, for Commander. But hey, if it works for you, then sweet. Soul Ring. A Soul Ring in every deck. Wayfarer's Bauble. Another card that allows itself to be sacrificed. It searches for a land, and it allows for more shenanigans, and the fact that it's 1 mana means you can cast it as soon as you start the game and start fixing your lands. Fire Diamond, a pretty sweet mana rock for monocolor decks. It's what a Signet would cost, except it produces 1 less color and it comes into play tapped. They're nice. There's better options, but it's great for budget. Ichor Wellspring. It literally does nothing other than draw you a card. Or I should say 2 cards. Again, outside of a deck like this, I don't think anybody would run it. Liquimetal Coating. Another permanent becomes an artifact. This can be interesting. It allows for shenanigans, obviously. It might even allow you to have a political play where you allow somebody else's creature to survive a whip flare by turning it into an artifact. It always pays to play nice, kids. Mindstone. Add a mana, sack to draw a card. Mycosynth Wellspring. When it enters or leaves the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand. Again, outside of a deck like this, don't see much use for it. Swiftfoot Boots, because Hexproof is favored over Shroud by WotC these days. Not saying that's necessarily wrong. It's definitely a lot more interesting. Good inclusion. Commander Sphere. Here's another new mana rock. It's basically Command Tower, but as in an artifact form, and it can sacrifice without tapping to draw the card, which is really nice. I'm glad that they pushed it a little bit, considering they designed it as a common card. Pristine Talisman, another mana rock that gains you life. Pretty interesting. Unstable Obelisk. Yeah, so when Spine of Ish Sah just isn't enough, they basically give you another one. This one will cost you 10. But in the meantime, it could also be a mana rock. It's kind of a nice rattlesnake card to have out late game. Most of the time, it's just going to be a mana rock, but if somebody does swing at you with something pretty gross, you know that you have an answer for it. Dreamstone Hedron, when you want 3 Mind Stones. And finally, Lore Seeker's Stone. Tap it, draw 3 cards, and it costs 1 more to activate for each card in your hand. This definitely seems like a more worthwhile way to spend your mana as a red player, because there's so often a lack of efficient draw engines for you in red. I'm definitely going to try this out in a couple of decks. All right, well, that has been the Daretti Scrap Savant Commander deck built from scratch. Definitely looking forward to playing with this without modifying it, without changing anything. I'll probably be making a deck with either him or Bosch as a commander, because I feel like there's a lot of interesting cards in here to play with. Well, thank you for watching. You can watch the rest of the unboxings at the end of the video by clicking on the appropriate annotation, which will be here, or here, or here, or here, somewhere around here. Thanks again. This has been Andre, and enjoy.